My name's Tim. If we haven't met before, I'm really glad to be here with you this morning. Hope you're glad to be here this morning as well. If you're new here, I just want to say a really special welcome to you. It's going to be a little bit different of a message this morning. This is the last time I get to speak to you guys for about 6 weeks. I'm going to take some vacation in there and have some friends come in and speak to you. And so I wanted to kind of fill you in on some of the things that have been happening in the background. You know, one of the interesting tensions in leading a church is like you want to give people enough information that they know where you're going, but not so much information that you bore them with where you're going, if that makes any sense at all. And so this morning we're going to do that. So if you're here for the first time, we don't normally kind of talk about what's going on in the background. But my hope is that if you're listening in on that, that this would actually help you, because I think most of you are here because you're looking to get connected somewhere. You're looking to find a community. And we're a particular kind of community that does particular kinds of things, and you probably want to know who we are before you decide whether you're going to come back or not. So maybe this will be useful to you. Over the last number of weeks, I have spent an unusual amount of time with Americans. It's been interesting. I don't normally spend a huge amount of time with Americans, being that I don't live in America. But over the last number of weeks, I have. I've traveled to America, which I know for some people is like, how did that go? You know? I can tell you that if you're one of those people that's like not quite sure about traveling to America, it was actually a totally normal trip to America. Nothing happened, nothing was different, everything was the same. And I can also happily report that there are a lot of really nice, sincere, Christ-following people still in America, in case you were wondering. The giggle, thank you, that's good. Let's cut the tension, it's awesome. You all are wondering, how political is he about to get? Not at all, actually. In fact, many of the people who I met with and spent time with there were more concerned about the state of affairs in their own country probably than you and I are. In more than one meeting, I heard pastors talk about how they feel like they're losing their tribe, like they're losing their sense of identity, and feeling like they're fighting an uphill battle because it seems as though there's many people who are content to be known by what they're against rather than what they're for, right? Christians don't do that. Christians don't vote for them. Christians don't approve of this. And like I said, my point is to be political here, not to be political here, but to point out a tension that I think they're feeling acutely, but we should wrestle with as well. And that is that many people outside the church would say, I know what Christians are against, but I'm not really sure what they're for. And I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind for us. It's a thought that's been rolling around in my head for a number of different weeks. And I just want to flesh it out with you, because when the first followers of Jesus received the name Christian, it wasn't because they had won an argument or made a point. It wasn't because they had political influence. It wasn't because they had issued statements about culture. It was because people looked at their lives and said, those people remind me of Jesus. And I think it's our constant and primary calling to live in a way that gets the same reaction today. Those people remind me of the stories I've heard of Jesus. In the book of Acts, in chapter 11, it says this: the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. So Antioch is a city. And so the group of people who were forming a church in that city were behaving and living in such a way that people saw their actions and said, those people remind me of Jesus. They didn't call themselves that. They were given that name by somebody else. Literally, the word Christian meant people who belong to Christ, or those Christ people, or even those little Christ people. The reputation came from people outside of the church community. People who saw something in those people as they lived their life together that reminded them of what they had heard about this man called Jesus. So we might ask ourselves, what exactly were they seeing? Well, Acts gives us a lot of different perspectives, but we'll just stick with the things that we see in Acts chapter 11. In fact, Acts chapter 11 starts in another city, and it says this: the apostles and the believers throughout Judea heard that the Gentiles also had received the word of God. Okay, so what's happening is that as people are telling the story of Jesus, right, started by this little group of Jesus' friends who were Jewish and living in Jerusalem and going out into other places in the world around them and telling the story of Jesus, non-Jewish people were becoming followers of Jesus. And there was a big question. In fact, we looked at this a number of weeks ago when we looked at Acts chapter 15, where this question has gotten so urgent to be answered. You know, because the Jewish people are like, well, if you're going to be a part of the Jesus people, hey guys, all you men, you have to go get circumcised, become Jewish first, and then you can be, Jesus people. And I refer to that as the worst evangelism tactic of all time. Right? Like imagine, just for a second, it's like all of you who are believers in Jesus, before you come to church next week, we have to check and make sure that you've been circumcised. Many of you, I'm not going to guess who it is, but many of you aren't going to come back, right? Like many of you are not going to come back after that. And so because this question is being asked and the implication is like, you got to do this, they're like, we got to get some clarity here. So Peter goes up to Jerusalem, similar to what we see happening in Acts chapter 15. And those Jewish circumcised believers criticized him, and they said, you went into the house of a non-Jewish person and ate with them. Right? They weren't supposed to be, from the Jewish perspective, mixing with anybody who wasn't a part of their religion already. They thought that Jesus was just for them. But the pattern is really clear all the way through Acts. And in Acts chapter 11, the early church crossed barriers. Right? Jews and Gentiles learned to worship together. Rich and poor people ate together. So as we read this story, we get a really clear picture that the early church was for people in a really radical way. In Acts chapter 11, verse 27 and 30, it says this: during this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. And this happened during the reign of Claudius. So prophets were men who the people believed heard from God, about things that were yet to come to pass. And often they spoke poetically, and it was kind of difficult to understand. But in this particular case, this man, Agabus, comes and he says, hey, heads up, there's going to be a famine, right? Before it happens, okay? And then the scriptures are clear because they're written a little bit later. This happened during the reign of Claudius, so it actually came true. And notice what their response to this was. The disciples, as each one was able, decided to provide help for brothers and sisters living in Judea. They did this, sending their gift to the elders by Barnabas and Saul. They were extremely generous. They were for generosity. They weren't for protecting themselves. They weren't for hoarding it, right? If you heard that all of a sudden food was going to be in short supply, wouldn't some of us have an instinct to maybe create those bunkers that everybody was creating during COVID? With all of our canned goods and stuff, or back in the days when we were worried about atomic bombs and things like that. We have a tendency as a people to kind of when things are going poorly, to pull in and to protect our own. That wasn't what the early church did. When they heard that tragedy was about to strike, they were for people by being for generosity. In other places in the book of Acts, we read that they were for compassion. They cared for widows and orphans. They fed the poor. They welcomed the outsider. Everywhere they went, they were for hope, because everywhere they went, they carried the good news of what Jesus had done. And that because they had seen Jesus live and die and conquer death, they were certain that God was for us in a way we never dared hope for. So it was clear to everyone around them that this group of believers were for Jesus. And they honored them, whether that's what they meant to do or not, by calling them those Jesus people, those Christ people. His name was heard regularly, his story told over and over and over again, and the character that came shining through in those stories was reflected in their lives. So eventually, the city concludes, those people are like Jesus. Because when I read the stories of Jesus left for us in the Gospels, Jesus didn't come announcing what he was against. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus didn't confront sin and speak the truth. He did. But when he came, he said, the good news of the gospel of God is being proclaimed to you. Turn your lives around. Repent. Come and follow me. That was his early message. While he did confront sin and truth, truth wasn't the headline. Jesus led with grace. The headline was always good news. I've come that they may have life. He healed, he served, he welcomed, he forgave, he restored. He moved towards people, and people who were nothing like Jesus often liked being around Jesus. Why? Because it was clear that he was for them. Matthew the tax collector, right? Zacchaeus the tax collector. Other sinners and prostitutes and outcasts, people with messy stories. And I have to stop and wonder, would people who are nothing like Jesus enjoy being around people who are exactly like us? Because that's the goal, right? That's the goal. The goal is to invite more and more people into the restoring, life-changing relationship with God through Jesus that Jesus made possible. Amen? Yes. To invite more and more people into that restoring work. That is the goal. That's the commission. The only mission the church was ever given was go out and make disciples. Invite people into this family that we're building around Jesus. And I know that we've done this series for the last 9 weeks. If you were here asking the question, what does our world need now? And this message isn't technically a part of that, but in some sense, I don't think it's a question we can stop asking. We should be asking ourselves all the time, what does the world need now, and how can I be a part of what God is going to give the world because it needs him? Striving to become what the world needs every time we gather, every time we get together. And that mission, that question, how do we do that in our day and age? Right? Every church on earth needs to answer that question for themselves. Right? And the church in Antioch answered it one way. And I don't think we're supposed to answer it the same way they answered it. Why? We don't live in Antioch in the first century. Right? Like our job is not to reclaim what was going on in Acts. Our job is to figure out what does it look like to do it here and now in Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows and Mission and Langley and wherever else you might call home. Burnett, we have to answer it for us, for ourselves, right? In different ways, but with the same heart. In different practical ways, but in ways that would still have people look and go, those people, they're for us and they're for Jesus. How do we become the kind of people and the kind of church that our community experiences as for them? This week, our staff and some of our board members, we spent some time praying and thinking and talking and planning all around that question, how do we become a community that our community knows is for them? Before I head away for the summer, I want you to see a little bit of it. You know, the how we do what we're doing, driven by the why of being for our community. Because, guys, church is a team game, right? We can sit in a room for 2 days and come up with all the plans in the universe, but if we don't do it together, then the plans are for nothing, right? Church is a team sport. It's a partnership, right? We have a work to do together. And even more than that, what I hope you hear this morning is that there is something that I, as your pastor, we as a church leadership team want for you. We want you to have a growing, vibrant faith. And you build that as you build relationships and share ministry with people at your local church. So what I hope comes shining through as I kind of turn to some maybe planning talk is our commitment to being for you and relational. All of our processes, everything that we do, all of our strategy is modeled after the same journey someone might take if they come and visit your home for the first time and grow to become one of your closest friends. So we've asked, how do we build helpful relationships and show that we are for our community? And it starts with being in our community, being a part of our neighborhood. To be for them, right? To be for others means we have to be with others. Before we or anyone else comes to our church, we're all part of a much larger community, right? Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, Langley, wherever it is that you live. I know we've got people sort of scattered over this part of the lower mainland. That's where it all starts. Being for the community by being in the community. There's work to do there, right? Because people don't always have the best impression of who we are, right? So, why are we in the community? Well, for the benefit of the community, but also to help change the way people view what it means to be a Christian in our day and age, right? We don't want to leave them with any guesses about what it means to follow Jesus. So a lot of what we try and do is support you as you live your life out in the community, but we also bind together to build trust. I think we've got the next slide there, but yep. As we do work together, and as you live your life out in the community, our goal is to build back up some trust if trust has been lost, right? We do that individually as we invest in people around us, through our relationships at work, at school, at play, and we do that together when we host events here, like our Easter after party that many of you came to, or trunk or treat, or when we make sandwiches together and take them down to Hastings to support the most vulnerable in our region. Of these activities, they all do a little bit of work out in the neighborhood to build back up trust. Trust is often lacking in people's relationship with church. But we believe that as a church, we can be uniquely useful to people. So that when the time is right and people start to get a sense that you're a part of a church, you might actually be able to invite them and they might actually say yes. You might actually say, hey, why don't you come to church with me next week, sit with me, and I'll take you for lunch afterwards. And they might actually come with you, right? We are hoping you and we as a community live in such a way that it builds trust with our neighbors, right? When that happens, we've helped them to move out of just the neighborhood and into the foyer, right? Which is where we are now. You can imagine this is a giant foyer. This is where we make all of our first impressions. It's why every week somebody gets up and says, we are obsessed with first impressions. Why? Because that's what this is for in a large way, is to help people have a positive first impression of what it means to reconnect with the church. If somebody has had a negative experience or has grown up in a house that had negative experiences, right? We want to make sure that when they come here, we blow those negative experiences right out of the water. The Sunday gathering is like the entranceway into our home. And for most people, right, it's where they'll get greeted for the first time. It's where they'll begin a journey and where we can begin a journey of hospitality and relationship with them. So, over the last number of years, if you've been at Burnett Church for a while, you might say, man, I feel like we do a lot of work in this section. And yes, that's true. Over the last 5 years, we've done a lot of work in this section. Why? Because, well, if the front door isn't welcoming, the rest of it probably doesn't matter. If people come in your front door and they don't have a positive experience, then they'll probably turn around and leave. So we've spent a lot of time on that. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about this, right? But what I do want you to see is that when people are here, right, it would be rude, wouldn't it, if somebody came to visit you and came to your front door, and then without any explanation, you turned around and walked into your house and expected them to make their way into your living room? Right? You wouldn't do that, right? We need to help actually guide people through that process, right? We actually have to help people know how to be connected, right? Now, notice I didn't say that the goal was to sit them down. It's to help them actually feel like they're a part of the family. This is what you're trying to do as you make relationships with people in your home, right? They come in, they sit down. You're actually trying to get to know them. You're trying to make them feel welcomed and comfortable in a way that your family feels. So our living room is really about where we bond. And the best way to do that in a church is to serve together. That's the essence of what this family that Jesus is building is all about. We are a group of people who have decided that for the sake of everyone else, we are going to be a community that serves others in Jesus' name. Probably the biggest piece of work that we're focusing on this year is how to help people connect better. You know, I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I think people have had this experience here. They come in, they attend a couple times, they go, yeah, this is warm, this is welcoming, I like this. How do I get involved? And the answer is, go talk to so-and-so, who they've never met before, right? And then that never happens, and 6 weeks later, they don't come back to your church because you didn't do a good job of helping them actually connect to somebody, right? Like it can't just be, hey, go talk to that person. We have to create the steps to help people take small, obvious steps towards actually being connected. Because, guys, I think that's what people want. I don't think people come to church because they okay, I used to be a musician and a worship pastor at a church. I'm just going to say something, and it has nothing to do with our group, because I think we have a wonderful group of musicians. I'm going to say something. It's not against them. It's just the truth. We are not the best show in town. People don't come to church because our show is so amazing. That's not why people come, right? They don't come because our music is the best music they'll ever hear. They don't come because the guy who prattles on for 30 minutes is the most entertaining dude in the room. That's not why they come, right? They come for you. They come for relationship. They come for connection because life is hard. And making friends isn't easy when you're not 5 years old and can't just walk up to somebody and be like, would you like to be my friend? Right? Making adult friendships is a bit more challenging than it was when you were little, okay? So it's incumbent on us. It's incumbent on me and my staff, but it's incumbent on us as we partner together to understand what people are looking for and to help them find it. Otherwise, they're not going to stay. They're not going to get connected, right? Over time, what we're supposed to do is help people as they do actually get connected in our living room, is to develop some relationships, okay? So that they can actually find those 5 or 6 people. Have you ever noticed this? You come to church and you talk to the same 5 or 6 people every time you come to church, right? You've got 5 or 6 people that really you look forward to talking to when you come. Part of our goal is to help people find those people because they are what make the church experience really interesting. What you end up doing is creating your own communities inside of the community. And these are the people that you start to do life with. These are the people that start to be the people that you call when things aren't going the way that you want them to. These are the people that really start to help you grow and change into the person that God has for you to be. When that starts to happen, what people usually want to do is offer it to somebody else, right? They want to become a part of the team. And that leads us into the kitchen. In my house, right, the helping happens in the kitchen. You'll know that you're in a depth of relationship with me if I will let you cook the food for the people that are at the party, okay? If you're a guest in my house and we don't know each other very well, I just want you to have a really good time. So I'm going to sit you down in the living room, offer you a drink, get you connected to some other people, and then I'm going to go and do the cooking and all of that kind of stuff. All the stuff that makes the party actually really, really interesting, I'm going to do. Now, if you're really, really close with me, I might ask you to come in and help. But every kitchen needs to be working on the same meal, right? With the same recipe. It's not just that you can come in and start rummaging through my cupboards and make whatever you want, right? This is a space where one chef trains another chef to make a meal that people will actually enjoy, right? It takes a depth of training and ownership and relationship that we have to help people build. This is another 2027 growing edge for us. Over the past 5 years, we've worked a ton on this side. So this, like I said earlier in the message, on this side, if you look at each one of these dots, right, like green is good, yellow is okay, red is bad. Okay, this was our assessment that we did on ourselves. We think that we're doing not too bad of a job over here in the welcoming, the foyer section, okay? Like I said before, we have a lot of work to do in helping make sure people know how to get connected. I think we have a fair amount of work to do in the kitchen to help people know how to actually make the same recipe. I think we're doing an okay job at doing that sort of life-on-life leadership development stuff. But in terms of having a plan for where we're going, we got some work to do there, okay? It's going to be a big part of what we're doing in 2027. And I recognize, in theory, if not always in practice, that you can't work on everything all at once, which is why I'm pretty okay saying, hey, we've got something that is worth inviting people to, and I think our reputation in the community is pretty good, right? But it's not okay to stay in those places where we're not doing those other things well. And so when I get back in August, I'm starting to look for the first 25 to 40 people we want to take through an intentional growth process. It's really an invitation to get into the kitchen, to learn the recipes, and to try to build a church that's for our community. And this is a big area of prayer for some of you over the summer, right? This is why I'm doing this. I know that it's Sunday morning, and I know that this is some strategic stuff, and I know this isn't really a sermon, and just bear with, we've got a whole bunch of content on YouTube if you want to see what every other Sunday is like, okay? So if you came this morning and you're like, oh, didn't think I was getting this, my apologies. We thought about this, but we only have so many chances during the year to do this. And what I'm really hopeful for is that some of you now will take some of this and go away and go, could I be the answer to someone's connection journey next year? Could I help people make small strategic steps into being known and being connected? I would love to hear from you. Is it time for me? Would I love to grow deeper in my relationship and think that I'm getting equipped with some tools to help lead, not just here in our church, but out in our community as well? I'm doing this morning because I'm hoping that those of you who hear this and the people who watch it online later will take some time over the summer and prayerfully consider what God is asking me to do. And then there's also this that I'm hopeful you'll get out of this. Look, the summertime is when Canadians come out of hibernation. Okay? The summertime is the best time for you to invest in relationships outside of here in the neighborhood where you live. Because for some reason, we hide from each other. It's probably the rain the other 9 months of the year. But over the next couple of months, it's not going to rain as much. These days that we're experiencing today become frequent. And you're going to go and you're going to go out to parks and you're going to go to beaches and you're going to go out places and you are going to have an opportunity, more opportunities in the next 3 months than you probably have in the other 9 to meet some new people, to find somebody new to invest yourself in. And I would love to think that our church is doing that over our summer holidays. And I should point this out. One final really important thing. Do you notice that this is a circle? Right? The arrows all keep pointing around. Right? So as we grow in our faith, the idea is that we go back out into our community to serve and invest in our community. And when we come back to church, we have the opportunity to invite some more people to come with us. Because that is what our world needs from us. A group of people who the world can look at and go, they are for me. Even, look, do you know that here at Burnett, even if you don't know what you believe about Jesus, we're hoping you will come, get connected, and belong even before you believe. There are ways for you to connect and participate here that we would love to help you experience and explore. And again, as I close up, I want you to hear me say, this isn't something I want from you. This is something I want for you. Because it's my experience that people exploring and living out their calling are experiencing fuller, more vibrant lives of faith, just like Jesus promised. So the question I'm heading into my summer, dreaming about and thinking about, is what would it look like if our community, if this church, like that church in Antioch some 2,000 years ago, were full of people identified as those little Jesus people. People clearly for their community. People committed to investing in and blessing the people around them in Jesus' name. What if our church was known first by what it's for? Because that's how we serve, how we partner, and how we invest in our community. My question for you is, can you see it? Can you see what a growing community carrying the DNA of Jesus into every shop, every workspace, every soccer field in the Lower Mainland would be like, and how it would change people's perspectives on who we are and who He is? I hope you'll go home today dreaming a little bit of all the ways God might use you to show that He is for your friends, for your family, for your neighbors. I want to pray for that, for you and for me. I want to invite our musicians to come back. We're gonna take time to sing one more song. It's just an opportunity for us to commit ourselves to building lives that look like Jesus' life. Would you bow with me as we pray?